Welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where guests share their powerful personal stories of transformation through human design. I'm Kathy Bashanko, an intuitive human design mentor and guide to radical self-trust. Join us as we explore how your human design experiment can truly change your life. Hi there. My guest today, Naomi Fox Reina, is a 2-5 emotional projector. She's triple split like me and a right angle cross of planning. Naomi is the founder of Light-Filled.co, a gathering place for those who are God-centered light seekers, those who love truth, and those who live from a place of love, or love from a place of live too, right?
All of it.
She offers multiple certification programs, including Light-Filled Astrology and Light-Filled Human Design, to bring more light, alignment, and freedom to the world. When she's not geeking out about charts, you'll find her spending time with her family or hiking around the Red Rocks of St. George. She has 3 children, 3 stepchildren, and is blissfully married to her best friend, Ralph. And I want to thank Naomi for making this happen. We had a little trouble getting our schedules together. It seems like we've been trying to connect to do this for months now. And I'm really glad to have you here. Naomi and I have not ever actually connected one-on-one before, but we're in all the same spaces. And I really respect your message and your work and can't wait for you to just say hello and dive right into your story, because I'm sure it's going to be a good one.
Thank you so much. And I'm delighted to be here. And I had so much fun looking at your chart because, of course, you and I have so many of those very unique similarities. And so I think we're just going to have a blast together. So yes, definitely.
Right? So similar and yet so different.
Quite. Yeah. I love it.
So I'd love to hear how you first were made aware of human design. I think you said you heard about it a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then came back to it. How did that first happen?
My very first time hearing about it, someone that was kind of an acquaintance, she was like, oh, you should run your human design chart. We were in another personality profiling group together that we were very, very involved in. And she was like, you need to look at this. You're going to love it. And so I pull it up and I was like, oh, it says I'm a projector. And she, now looking back, she had so much bitterness that threw at me because she was also a projector and she wanted to be special. And so I was very turned off by her reaction. And I also distinctly remember thinking, there is no way that the minute I was born has any bearing on my life. But I looked at the PDF that came from the site that I ran it on. I remember distinctly looking at all the shapes and all the lines and all the numbers and all the symbols and reading through the little summary. And I know that it started to shift something in me. And I saved the PDF and stuck it in my Dropbox, even though I thought it had no significance whatsoever, and closed it out and stopped looking at it.
You remember the date? Have you ever gone back to look at the date?
I don't remember the exact date.
Yes. You saved it in Dropbox. That's how I know when I started.
That's true.
Because my PDF is screenshot and I have a date, and I know that I started it all in 2016. Jan.
I hadn't thought about that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You remember what that was?
2012.
Okay. Wow. That's a long time ago. Okay.
It was a long time ago. And at the time, I was in a very, very unhealthy marriage. And of course, as you and I know, and everybody listening, human design is so beautiful at bringing out your authenticity and your power and clarity and truth and all of these things. And there was no way that I could have integrated this information. And I wasn't ready to topple over my life at that point. And that did come later. And then it was after that point that I was introduced to astrology, once I had gotten out of that very, very unhealthy marriage. And I was in a new town, kind of recovering from, oh my gosh, I'm getting divorced and I have these kids and I never wanted this. And it was actually my second divorce. And so I had many layers of shame and many layers of failure. And I went to this gal who was cutting my hair and she was like, oh, I'm really into astrology. And I was like, cool, that's great. Like, yay for you. Not my thing. And she was like, when's your birthday? And I was like, oh, I'm a Sagittarius, but I don't really resonate with that stuff. She's like, okay, do you know the minute you were born? And I was like, yeah, doesn't everyone? She's like, no. So she runs my chart and tells me all of this stuff. Like, I barely knew her. We hardly had any conversations before this moment. And she, in like 10 minutes, tells me all of this really deeply personal stuff about myself that I felt exposed and curious and naked and terrified and completely intrigued. And I was like, you have to explain everything that you just told me. Like, I need to know why you know. Like, not like, I bet you like it when people are friendly to you, kind of like template advice. Like, it was very specific. Like, I have a Virgo moon, and she's like, I bet when you're talking to people, you see something over off to the side and it kind of drives you crazy, but you're not going to stop the conversation to take care of it. But as soon as the person leaves, you probably take care of it. And like things like that, where I was like, how can you possibly know that? Like the neuroses that comes from a Virgo moon with a Sagittarius sun. And so it changed my whole life. And understanding my Venus placement explained why I married the men that I did. And also gave me the power to figure out how to date differently so I could begin to trust myself to choose a mate that would fill that need of my Venus without getting into another unstable relationship. And so that started to change my life. And I went through and I experienced tons of transformation. Like, it was absolutely incredible. My dating life was fun and I enjoyed it. And I met the most incredible people and it was fantastic. And then I hit a massive wall of a physical crash and couldn't function. Like, went from conquering the world and having tons of success to like, can't get out of bed, can't like crawl out of bed, take my kids to school, come home, crawl back into bed, crawl out of bed to go pick them up from school, and then come home and crawl back into bed. And it was horrific. And I couldn't find anybody that could explain what was going on. It was, I was about 37 when I hit this crash. And about a year and a half into this of like not functioning, I had to move across the country and move back in with my parents because I'm a full-time single mom of 3 little kids at this point. And I'd healed a ton from PTSD and all the things. Like, I was doing the work. And I had, healed and cried and processed and forgave and, all of the things. So it was like, what is going on? What more is there to do? And so I'm living with my parents, and my parents are lovely people, but nobody wants to move back in with their parents in their late 30s. And a friend of mine was like, oh, have you ever looked up human design? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm a projector, but that didn't really, I don't know anything about that. She's like, no, you can't be a projector. She's like, you're more like a manifesting generator. She's like, are you sure you have the minute that you were born correct? And I was like, are you seriously asking me that? Like, at that point, I had been teaching astrology for years.
Right.
She was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Maybe that's why you can't get out of bed, because you act like a Manny-gen, but like clearly that's not you. And so then diving into the world of the projector and the almost inevitable late 30s projector crash, all of a sudden I had a new piece of information that was like, oh, this is a huge part of it. Later, years later, I spent 5 years in that low energy place trying to restore my alignment as a projector. I finally found a doctor who did figure out what was physically going on with me. And it was Epstein-Barr and chronic silent strep and some hormonal imbalances. And my adrenals were nearly ready to give up the ghost and like put me on steroids for the rest of my life. So she was able to turn that all around. But I couldn't have learned that information and used it and actually healed without knowing that I'm a projector with all 3 non-sacral motors, like you can deeply relate to, and with the sun gate coming off of the undefined sacral, and understanding the massive desire for energy output with the very inconsistent access to it. All of it had to come into alignment. And now I'm 44 and finally feeling like, okay, I have somewhat of a handle of how to manage my energy and how to actually live day to day in a way that is very successful and very happy.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm sorry, did I miss what year did you go back to human design?
It would have been in 2019 was when I reemerged into it. And of course,
that's funny because
that projector, I just soaked it up.
That's when I really,
yeah.
When I don't know if you've heard my story, but I was introduced to it in 2016 and started to like deeply resonate with what I was told about myself from first hearing it, and then started to do the research. And I've told this story many times. So for those of you who've heard it, just bear with me. I'll make it quick. But, and then I didn't resonate with all the crystals in the earth and the rave prophecy and all these things that I now understand. But back then I was like, I'm just like little Kathy over here in North Georgia going to the Episcopal Church and reading about crystals of consciousness in the earth and all this stuff. And it was just too much. And I decided this is some crazy cult stuff and I'm not that person, Yeah. And I stopped and then I couldn't not think about it. Every time things would happen, like there would be a little voice in my head that would say, well, you initiated that.
Yeah.
They didn't recognize you. Oh, you didn't wait for clarity. You made that decision spontaneously, those sorts of things, right? So then finally, but it was 2019 is what I'm saying,
Right.
was when I revisited it as well. And I've met many people who found that 2019.
There was a huge wave. Yeah. Huge wave. And I think there's multiple waves, but there was like a massive consciousness that drew people to or returning to this information, around that same time.
And as somebody who is so astrology based, do you have any idea what was going on then? Was that when there was one, I don't know. I don't want to even try to guess what it was. Do you have any?
Yes. So right at the beginning of 2020, we had that massive conjunction of
the grand conjunction. They call
5 different placements. Yes, that happened on January 12th of 2020. And I believe that it was a procession to that. I believe that it was a preparation that the universe was like, okay, we need a whole lot more people that are awake before what's about to go down. And then a bunch of people, I think there was another wave in 2020. And then, you have the other waves after that. And of course, there were the waves before 2019 that needed to be there to teach those that were like saying, oh, I'm thirsty now. I really want all this information. And so as you look back, like there's these different awakenings that happen for different teachers, different guides, different leaders. And I think that the time has come for human design to largely be really impacting things. We had some significant transits through Aquarius that I think were kind of prepping the way for Pluto to move into Aquarius. And Aquarius is the sign of the future and technology and transformation and astrology and human design and just thinking outside of the box. And so I see all of it. And I also can see how it's even described and explained from a religious standpoint and stuff that doesn't have to do with this, because all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful point that you said in the end there. So so what was it specifically about your human design that helped you to heal yourself with when you talked about that, if you hadn't known all this, you wouldn't have.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest piece was for sure understanding the lack of sacral definition and how that's played out and how it has that kind of perpetual amplification of the sacral energy, which of course I was surrounded by. My children we have 2 sacral generators and a emotional manifesting generator child. And the men that I was married to was a manifesting generator and a generator. And most of my family are either generators or manifestors. My mom and 3 of my siblings are manifestors. And then my dad and a bunch of my siblings are manifesting generators with a few generators and 1 projector. There's 10 kids in my family of origin. And so out of 12 of us, 2 projectors. So statistically pretty much on point, but a lot of manifested channels. And so my favorite thing to dress up as I joke, is a manifesting generator, because so much of me believes if I just click it into place, if I just give it a little bit more, I can be like that. And so having the clarity of this is why you're not like that, and pointing to other gifts that I hadn't recognized, like I'd seen them in myself, but I hadn't fully claimed them and allowed others to see them in me. Because when we slow down as projectors, when we actually get into our rest, our aura can do the work because we're not so tired. And our aura can go out and announce to others, like, you should invite this person to do this thing. You should invite them for their insights in ways that people feel compelled to, because we are resting and we're investing in our mastery of whatever system it is that we're here to master, so that we can more appropriately guide. And so we can be rested for those invitations.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, when you say our aura can go out and invite, do you mean that it's going to invite the people you come in contact with, or do you really mean that it goes out into the world and draws things in to you?
I've seen both. I've observed both in myself and others, that when I remember that, the non-sacrals are not here to work, as Ra says, but that the quote unquote work, the actual exertion is significantly more productive when I allow the aura part of me, the part that people perceive, to just be sparkly and shiny. And I'll get the most amazing invitations, as I'm pretty sure any aligned projector could tell you, like, oh, this happened and then this, and it was incredible. And like, romance comes differently, and business partners come differently, and everything just becomes so much easier and aligned when you can actually remember to truly wait for recognized invitations, not just an invitation, as I'm sure we all have come to know. Somebody invites you to shovel manure. That's not really necessarily a recognized invitation, but
unless you absolutely love horses and would do
exactly
anything to be around them, and you're just happy for a chance, right?
Bingo, exactly.
Yeah.
And
thinking of my daughter.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I have a stepdaughter that loves horses. And so really waiting for that recognized invitation is more crucial than the formal invitation itself, is the recognition.
Yeah, that's a great point. So looking at your chart and looking at, some of the similarities that we have, we are both triple splits, but our splits are very different. Your head and ajna are both defined, and that's one split for you, whereas I have a completely open ajna, and the only gate I have defined on my head center is the 64. So you compromise that 64 for me. And then you and I both have defined will and emotional centers, spleens and roots, but ours is combined and the opposite. Yours is the 3740, so you've got the will center to the solar plexus, and then you have the spleen to the root, which obviously, I'm explaining this for those listening, with the 1858, which my husband has that.
So does my husband.
Really? That's probably better than just one of you having it, because
I totally agree.
I amplify the crap out of that channel for him.
I totally agree. That's a rough one to not share.
And then my husband and I have the electromagnetic of the 2838, which you and I also have. But the channel of struggle is an interesting electrodynamic channel.
Yeah, it sure is.
And then, but I have the way that my splits work is I have the will to the spleen with the 2644 and the solar plexus to the root with the 3955. So we have that kind of defines it all. But we do define the sacral together, because my my design sun and my design Venus and my design Uranus, I think. God, I can't even remember. Is it Uranus or Neptune? I think it's Uranus. I'm not looking at mine. Yeah, it's also a 59. So I have that 59 hanging gate 59 3 times, and it's
so intense
happy when it connects with a 6. So anyway, so just a little bit of fun to look at how all that works. But you and I both have that hanging 14 and the hanging 9 on the undefined sacral, and those are really intense energies. And I think they're really great projector energies to have on an undefined sacral. And what's funny is the 9 is your conscious sun and the 14 is my conscious.
I know, it's fascinating.
Right? But and so that 14 for me has been really, that my purpose. I'm here to do creative work that I love, right? But with that being my conscious sun, I have the 8 as my grounding energy, which is all about uniqueness. So really knowing, I had this epiphany during this workshop at conference where Orion Ohev had us rewrite our incarnation cross definitions or whatever. And I just really remember when I put those two together, and it was like, I'm here to do creative work that I love, even if I have to do it alone.
That resonates.
I shouldn't say even if I have to, even if that means doing it alone, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not here to compromise. And that 9 is my Mercury, which, is all about focus. And so for me, it's all about, I'm here to do this work, and I'm going to talk about where to focus it in this way. And I'm wondering how you see those two energies, because your 14 is your Uranus.
My conscious Uranus, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I feel like the 9 gate that isn't completed by the 52 as a sun gate, it makes me very intense. Like when I focus on something, I'm all the focus, and I'm a 2-line on that. You're the 5-line on that. And so it's very much a leave me alone. I'm going to go be in my own space out of the gaze of other people. I don't want anybody observing this creation that's happening. And I sort of bury myself in it, and then I dive very deep, as most projectors do. When projectors get latched onto a system, they're like, oh, let's go. And I feel like it really just kind of ratchets that up. And so without the stabilization of the 52, I have a tendency to not know when enough is enough, like extra much. So, and of course my husband has the whole channel, which is so much of how he just, and I love that his 52, which is the gate of the mountain or the gate of stillness, is in his unconscious earth. It feels poetic. It feels just like, and then his conscious sun gate is 17 coming off of his undefined ajna. And I have my unconscious Venus is 62. So I receive his opinions with my details, with the softness of that Cancer unconscious Venus energy. And I just love the poetry that can happen in relationships. And it doesn't have to. I've seen lots of successful relationships that don't necessarily have that flow. But knowing that about myself when I was single and knowing what I was looking for more specifically really changed being able to date, because I am so analytical, because I am so like, okay, there's a system here and we can work within it. And so that 9, I feel like, expresses very strong. And my ascendant in astrology is still in the 9 gate because they're only a degree and a half apart. That's another reason why my energy is so big, is because my sun and my ascendant are very close. I was born 3 minutes before sunrise, which is how that happens. So the first time you and I met in person, I was very unwell physically. And I remember thinking, I bet most people here aren't really getting the authentic version of me, because I literally can't, because I was
you didn't even have energy for a conversation. I don't think we really
I kept slipping away at the conference, and I knew I wanted to be there, but it was like being trapped in a cage. And that had been my reality for so many years. And I'm very grateful for the exquisite struggle that was, being a 28/6 Venus. So I'm really familiar with that type of struggle. But
gate of struggle, yeah. I wanted to pause for a second. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just noticed we were I apologize to anyone listening, because we were throwing around a lot of numbers. So maybe we should because I was doing it totally. I started it. So the 28 is the gate of struggle. That's why I just kind of decided we should probably say what things are as we're naming them. And I tend to use numbers because there's so many different names associated with things. And sometimes if you normally use the traditional human design, and some people will call it the quantum human design name, and some people use the Ching names. And so.
For sure. Yes, it's easy. It's so easy. Two projectors that are masters of a system, right? Getting a little out of hand. But yes, I love knowing about my gates and knowing the joy and the struggle of all of them.
Did you get in your head when you started learning that?
That's a great question. I feel like by the time that I came to the human design system, I was less inclined to bypass through my mind. And I feel like having a defined head and ajna, I'm always thinking about something. I'm always analyzing. I'm always processing, but in a way that feels very good, where I would imagine those with an undefined head and ajna, that level of thinking is not serving them. And it's an escape or an amplification of the energies around them, where those that have that defined head and ajna through any of the channels, I don't think that we experience overthinking in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, that's been one of my biggest deconditioning.
Oh, for sure. With your wide open ajna, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. And when I was learning human design, like there was a long time where I would get really hung up on, did I really know it, instead of was I really living it? I was more worried about,
Right.
Was I going to look stupid when I didn't remember the name of a gate? Which now, I'm sorry, I don't care. I will sometimes have someone tell me a name of a gate, and I have no idea what they're talking about. And then all of a sudden they say the number, and I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that.
Right.
But I also have a right variable mind as well.
Yes.
So, so many reasons that. But I will tell you that there is definitely like a whole thing going on with me that I'm like looking at and thinking, okay, where am I missing something? Because I feel like that's happening more and more and not such a great way with me, where more and more I notice, like I'll listen back to a podcast and I'll hear myself use a completely wrong word, not about human design stuff, just about life and stuff. And
Maybe.
I'm like, that isn't even the word I meant to say there. But anyway, and so I do think there are a lot of answers in our human design. And do you study the gene keys at all?
Somewhat, yes. It hasn't clicked as a voracious system to dive
Right.
into. But I find a lot of benefit and value in it, but it hasn't integrated at the same level as human design.
Yeah, I don't claim to, but I haven't done any actual training in gene keys, but as I go through these transits, I've been contemplating now. I really make a point of looking at the gene keys because the gene key tells you the name of the shadow, and then it also
Right.
gives you the two expressions of that shadow, the extroverted and the
Yes.
introverted expression, and then it gives you the gift and then the city. And so by going through and doing all that, it's been really helpful. And then I was listening to something from Richard Rudd last night. It was some podcast interview where he was talking about the new human. And maybe if I think of it, I'll put it in the show notes because it was a really interesting podcast he did. If someone knows how to get him on my podcast, I need to connect with him. I would really like that. But he's a little busy. Anyway, he was talking about something and I pulled out my Gene Keys profile again and I read what's called your radiance, which is your design sun, right?
Hmm.
And it was reading about how for me to be healthy, with my 59, I need to have certain levels of intimacy and connection and all this stuff. And so then I was like, ooh, I wonder if that has something, maybe I need to, because there's all this energy right now in astrology that's telling us to look at our relationships. So I'm like, ooh, maybe this is another thing that's telling me, how can I better connect in my relationship? Maybe that's part of the physical, so. Hey, just popping in for a quick sec. I know we're deep in conversation, but if you're feeling called to dive deeper into your human design experiment, I'm here to guide you. Whether it's a personalized reading or one-on-one mentorship, let's explore the next steps towards radical self-trust together. Visit kathybashanko.com to learn more. All right, back to the conversation. There's so much more to explore. Better connect in my relationship. Maybe that's part of the physical, so, because I do think that when we start to notice physical things, like my cognitive things, I don't know if that was weird. I feel like I kind of am saying this whole thing, and then I'm like, did I really want to tell everyone that I'm doubting my cognitive abilities? But it's not really a doubt of it. It's just an awareness of, seeing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It also feels like you have a deep gift, a spiritual gift that's emerging, that's kind of tugging and pulling at other things. And so it's just the bridge in between until you stabilize and really fully find yourself on the other side of whatever it is that's being born in you. That's what I see.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really cool. But you know what, when I was looking, or you were talking about your health journeys and stuff, and then I was like, oh, and look, her design sun is gate 40, which is all about, taking care of you. And right. So did you feel like that? Because did you grow up LDS? Because you're in the LDS church now, right?
Yes, I did. I grew up very LDS in the South Denver metro area, and 9 brothers and sisters. Constantly got asked, "Are you Mormon or Catholic?" Or your parents must really love sex.
I was raised Catholic.
Yeah, and people say, "Do you guys not have cable?" Like the level of inappropriate things that happen when you grow up in a large family. And I grew up LDS and very academic. Like all my siblings are very driven, academic, multiple doctors. My brother is a rocket scientist. My sister studied computational astrophysics. And so high value placed on science and things that were credible and societally accepted. And then there's me. I got divorced when I was 26, and then I got divorced again in my mid-30s. And that was heretical. And then to find myself on a path of astrology was very unexpected, but I couldn't deny the peace in it. And I couldn't deny that God had led me to this. And the more that I studied astrology, of course, the invitations came. People were like, oh, could you read my chart? Oh, would you please teach a class about this? I really, really want to understand it the way you see it. Would you please offer a certification? I really want to do this, and I want to do it the way you do it. And it was repeated, clear, unmistakable invitations into this. And I will never forget, I was in the process of teaching a whole bunch, and God just spoke right to my mind. By the way, what you do is called Light-Filled Astrology, and you're supposed to help those that want to learn astrology. They're feeling prompted, and they also want to follow me, is what God was saying to me. And I was like, no. I don't want to teach astrology. I don't want to be an astrology teacher. That will make me weird. But I still had so much of the conditioning of a religious childhood and background and family. And I believe any conservative religion, especially conservative Christian religion, I encounter this a lot in my work because so many people feel directly prompted from God to learn astrology, and they're very confused. They're like, how do I process this when I don't want to leave my religion, or I don't want to walk away from God, but I feel I keep being tugged back to it. It keeps popping in my mind. Or now human design has had a similar path. And I believe we're all called to different walks to develop and grow ourselves and others. And part of my calling is to shine a light on things that are typically considered more heretical, and also to still hold on to my great and powerful God. I'm still very active in my church. I am the gospel doctrine teacher in my ward. So if anybody's LDS or has ever been LDS, you'll be like, oh yeah, like I get to teach the core doctrines of our church every so often as I rotate with that. And I absolutely love to teach. Obviously, I'm a teacher. I'm a projector. I'm a 2/5. Like, I'm born to teach. And I also love to help gently illuminate things that have been mysterious to people about things like astrology and human design with love and light and clarity and peace, because I believe that they're all there. And like I said, like all truth can be a different facet of another truth. And we never need to be afraid of seeking truth. And so much of conservative Christian religion has, my opinion is that a lot of conservative Christian religions it's been an effective way to control people, to say, if we get them scared about hell, we can get them to make better choices and to do whatever it is that we want them to do. And obviously that's a very negative perspective on religion. And I don't believe all religion is that way. But unfortunately, I do believe there is a lot of corruptness in the execution of religion, which is why so many people are waking up to it and stampeding away from religion, because the only thing that kept them in, sometimes for generations, was the fear of hell, the fear of punishment, the fear of social ostracization. And now people are like, I don't care. I've got 50 friends on the internet who think like me. So I no longer need this. I don't need to be accepted in my family of origin or in my community, because I found another community that validates me. And so that tug pull that used to kind of keep people locked in has disappeared. So many of the people that are in my space are still in their religion because they truly want to be, not because of a cattle prod that's making them be, which is the camp that I fall into of, I'm here because I've unpacked it and I've taken and dismantled every part of it. And I went to God and I said, show me what goes back. Show me what's of you. Because that's all that I care about. I don't care about culture of the religion. I don't care about whatever. I don't want any part of that, because I had already had so much of my life toppled over with 2 divorces, which I'm so grateful for, because it forced me to consider that maybe the way that I saw things wasn't actually the way that God saw things. And so I put back only the things that God told me, this is of me, this is pure, this is sacred, this is good. The rest, whatever. Let people have their opinions, let people be flawed and whatever. But that's how I have stayed in my religion and chosen to be here. And also I have so many people that reach out to me like, how do I stay? And also, how do you stay? How do you do this when you know all the things that you do? I don't see it as a conflict personally.
That's great. That's great that you have this resolution. I've actually talked to a couple of people. I don't know if you've seen any of my conversations. I've talked to 2 people who have left the LDS church. And, you know, everybody's story is different, and I'm not in any way saying one is the right story, right? Everything's right for who they are. But I'm wondering if you've gotten pushback from any of the leaders in the church, or at least questions to where people have come and said, "Hey, I heard you're doing this thing," and have you had any kind of?
Not quite like that. So like my stake president is what it's called, is like the area authority. And I was meeting with him a few years ago, and he asked me like, so what do you do for work? And I always check in with God before I answer the question, just to see like, how should I answer this? And usually God is like, tell him whatever you want. So I was like, oh, I teach astrology. That's kind of the quick, like, if I'm talking to somebody just in that context. He was like, oh, is that like palm reading? And I was like, not at all. But thank you so much for asking. And it actually opened doors to have in-depth conversations about why people are leaving the church. He actually asked me, so I said, I have a lot of people who are still active in the church and a lot of people who have left this church and other churches in my space that I teach. And it was obviously something that had been on his mind. And so he invited me and said, actually, I want to know your thoughts on that. Why do you think people are leaving the church? And he pulled out a pen and paper and like started writing down what I said. And I was like, oh, what a beautiful invitation. But I had to clear my own energy before I could have those types of conversations. I had to make peace with, this is what I do, and this is what I love, and this is how I help people, and remove the shame and wrestle with the different intricacies and why they were even there in the first place. So my energy can be clean when I'm talking about it. Because I don't come with resentment and I hate that I was controlled and blah, blah, blah. Like, not that there's anything wrong with that. If people are at that stage, that's beautiful and perfect for them. But I feel that I just come at it with a different energy. My motivation in human design is innocence. And when I operate from that place, I feel like it's very palpable. And obviously I can slip into the reverse of that, of the desire, and operate from that place and be in a place of push. But when I'm in my innocence, I just allow people to have their experience. And if they want to know more, I'm happy to explain it. And if they don't want to, that's totally fine. And if they have a completely wrong idea about me, that's totally fine too. Being a 2/5 and a projector, I have learned very few people will ever see me accurately. And I have made total peace with that.
You have to, right? As a 2/5.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah, 2/5s and 5/2s, you got that double projection going on. So definitely have to let go. And I do want to go back to, the idea of the gate 40, your design sun, because that's
It's also
kind of,
my conscious moon.
oh, I didn't even notice
I
that.
have it coming and going.
Okay. So tell me what that gate means to you.
I resonate with the term the gate of aloneness. I love, because obviously I've pondered on this a lot. I love the idea of the retreat. Like you retreat into yourself to replenish, to renew, but also that deep, deep abiding loneliness that can occur. When I was single after my second divorce, and I really felt all my feelings and did the healing and learned to be still and allow what's there, I became very happy with myself. I really came to love myself and know myself, but there was such a fierce loneliness. I ached for my companion that I always had been looking for. I saw a quote that said, "The moment I heard my first love story, I started looking for you." And that's how I feel about my husband. And I spent 5 years single and healing, and I definitely needed like the first 2 of that to like stabilize after a violent marriage that was so terrible. But meeting him, he's such a balm to my soul. And I still can keenly remember the loneliness that could only be filled by that companion, somebody to pour my love into. It wasn't even like I need somebody to love me. It's like I had all this pent up love that I needed to give, but you can't just, go out on a date with somebody and like pour all your love into them. I mean, people try, but the most healing thing was just to deeply love him. And of course, that he was like there for it, he loved it. But being a Venus in Scorpio, I love too much. It's like loving like a tsunami. It's so intense. And so that gate 40 has been such a beautiful source of peace and clarity for me. I feel like Virgo moons are like oracles, especially when they're clear and pure within themselves, when they've done the work to get their own impurities out so that they can see clearly. Being a Virgo moon and a projector, I have laser pointed insight for people if they really want to hear it.
Yeah. And as a projector, sometimes it's hard to wait to make sure they really want to hear it, right?
It has been, but it's so much more rewarding now. The success is so much more amplified when I do properly wait. And it takes years to decondition that one, but I feel like I'm starting to dance in the realm of like really getting it.
Yeah. The thing that came up to me why I focused in back then on when I first started talking about Gate 40 was when I was thinking about how in the Gene Keys teachings, the design sun is our radiance, which is what keeps us healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been talking about your health issues. And I looked it up because I couldn't remember the exact words, but the key phrase for Gate 40 in the Ravi Ching is the point of transition between struggle and liberation. Right? And so it feels really aligned with this time where you had to go and like be totally taking care of you out of all of this stuff and, really finding yourself to be able to go forward into that next chapter or whatever. Yeah. So, the other thing I was wondering about too is when you said when you were told about, your hairdresser told you about astrology that you were like, oh, I feel so seen. What are the layers that you feel human design has brought to you that weren't there in your journey with astrology?
It definitely was an equivalent level of deepening that being seen, but it also felt like it put the tools in my hand that I could actually apply to intentionally create that success. Because, of course, I had created success in my life, but it was by the innocence, honestly, just being in my innocence, I would kind of turn around and look like, oh, look at that amazing trail of flowers that blossomed behind me. And it was tons of success and tons of all of that. But as soon as I try to do it, set the goals, do the desire thing, it would all fall apart. And I had no explanation. There was nothing that could show me like, here's the line. This is how you consistently can kind of create that success and understand why it happened. And here's why the wheels came off in these circumstances. And so it really kind of put up the container, kind of like the idea that the masculine and feminine, one of the most beautiful things that a healthy masculine will do for a healthy feminine, and this can be internal and it also can be in a relationship, is to create that container of safety, to say, I will hold this space and you can go flourish and blossom and create as the beautiful feminine that you are, and I'll make sure that you're protected. And so I feel like all of us experience that in some way, but for me as a projector, it was, hey, sweetheart, if you're going to commit to things 5 days a week, all day long, it's never going to work for you. And you're going to injure yourself on some level. So like that container of like, how do I flow and how do I be myself could finally start to take shape.
Now, what is your husband's type, you said?
He's a 1-3 sacral generator, single definition. So he has 6 undefined centers. And he's very open. He's extremely intuitive and sensitive, although he had no idea. And he's a very masculine person. He builds with his hands and he's an Aries and all the things. But he brings a steadiness that is not me. I am steady in some ways,
right?
Yes. And he loves the emotionality that I bring in the femininity, and I love the stability and the masculinity that he brings.
Yeah. So I want to ask a selfish question.
Go ahead. I love
when I was messaging with you and I shared my chart and you said something about me having 3 planets out of bounds, I think was the term.
Yes.
And I was like, ooh, I don't know what that really means.
That's new.
And you kind of told me. But I wonder if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about, because these are some of the flavors that I think astrology layers onto human design that I think is really an interesting complement. So
absolutely. And I always pull both charts if I'm going to, because there's things you can't see in the human design chart that are going to be in astrology. And there's things you can't see in astrology that are going to be in the human design chart. And so it feels like lopping off an arm to only look at one and consider one. And so an out-of-bounds planet is when a planet is above or below a certain declination, a certain degree point, which only happens near the equinoxes. So it's only going to be placements that are Gemini or Cancer, because that straddles the solstices, not the equinoxes. So you're going to straddle the summer solstice and then the winter solstice of Sagittarius and Capricorn. So only placements that are there can go above or below this because of the stretch of the Earth and the extremeness that happens at those times. And so I noticed with yours that your Mercury, Venus, and Mars are all in Sagittarius. So I was like, I'm just really curious if these happen to be out of bounds placements. And sure enough, they were, because my Mars in Capricorn is also out of bounds. And when I first learned about this years ago, I was watching a video, and I'd already been teaching astrology for a while before I even came across this concept, because there's so many layers to all of this. And I was watching this and I was like, if this doesn't describe me, then all of astrology is crap. It was so dead on. And it was just this. So if you just go to YouTube and search, Mars out of bounds or whatever out of bounds, there's tons of content out there about it. But it's this idea that that planet is over the top muchness. It's out of bounds. It struggles with boundaries. It doesn't contain itself. And so Mars out of bounds is really intense, really, really powerful, and throws themselves at something, like probably going splat sometimes and then having to recover. And it's not just a projector thing, and it's not just the all three motors thing, but then you kind of put that crowning thing on it. And then you also have it with your Mercury. Like, you don't want to talk about small talk and all of that. You want to fully express that Mercury, and your mind wants to fully explore everything, because Mercury is the mind and communication, and Venus is love, and Venus in Sagittarius is going to be very much about freedom and very much about leave the door open and I'll come back if I want to. Like, if you make it pleasant enough for me, I'll maybe come back and lay my head here, kind of a thing. Sag is very much I'm the wild stallion, and I'm happy to just jump the fence, and I'll come back if I feel like it. And so there's a high need for freedom in the Venus and Sag, which culturally isn't, probably, especially with your upbringing, was not really celebrated or acknowledged. Most people don't think, oh, I need freedom inside of my relationship. Mm-hmm. And that's a good, healthy thing. We see relationships often as constricting. And so there's elements of each of those that probably would be really beautiful and impactful to go through and feel out the layers and all of that. But when somebody has out of bounds planets, it can really inform so much of the chart that just doesn't, it sheds that other layer of oh, that's why this particular one is so strong, when it isn't really clear otherwise.
Yeah, that's interesting. So now when you do readings with people, do you look at, would you look at that and then say, okay, it's Mars is out of bounds and my Mars is in gate 26. So that adds this flavor. So do you put all that together, or are they looked at as a separate?
I love it as a synthesis. I mean, the separateness still has a lot of value, because you can still find value in the pieces, but often, and I follow a lot of intuition, but I honestly don't do that many one-on-one sessions anymore, just running, a multiple certification company. But yes, I love looking at charts and finding those little details. I can obviously do a full chart reading and all of the things, but I actually find it more productive to look at a piece of the chart and kind of fully dive into parts of it and explore what's going on in your life. I have a Light-Filled Leaders program that I work with those that really want that massive change and that ongoing conversation. And so working with people in that way, and I only take 2, maybe 3 at a time ever, because as a projector, I just can't overcommit my energy, even though I want to.
Yeah, right. Oh, that was another thing we wanted to talk about. Because you and I were talking about this a little bit before we hopped on, was this idea of, you've been doing this for quite a while. I've been 8+ years now into my design. And as projectors, there's still these cycles of boom and bust, right? Do you find that that's still the thing?
100%. And you and I are on the far end of that spectrum, with all three motors, with Mars out of bounds, and just so many defined centers.
Right.
I have rarely seen somebody's chart that so many things in my life, I'm like, oh, I bet Kathy experiences this too, because it's just so many pieces that normally you would see that level of intensity in a sacral being. And we get to be these very unique creatures.
Right. Yeah. So, I was just trying to find something, but I couldn't find it. So that the whole idea of, like, because I just finished doing this challenge that I for a new thing I'm launching. I did this Shine Your Light 5-day
I love
style
it.
edit challenge. And it was
Yeah.
really, really fun. And someone just asked me, how did you feel? How do you feel? This was like the last day of the challenge, right? I was just like wrapping up. And they're like, how'd it go? How do you feel? Are you tired? And I said, actually, I'm really energized. It's been really a lot, but I don't feel tired. And they were like, oh, that's great. And I feel like that's how it is when you're a projector, right? When you're in the throes of what you love, you're not tired. You have the energy. And then, like, the next day, like, it was all done. And I'm like, okay, I need to just wrap up these couple technical things. And this 3 days later, and I'm still like, okay, I need to wrap up these couple, because then it's like, boom, right? It's done, right?
Because you disconnect from the amplification of the sacral, where like
Yeah.
a sacral being is actually not only lit up by what they're doing when they're in alignment, but they recharge their energy. Their energy regenerates when they're in that. And so they can be tired, but they can go and go and go. Where, yes, for people like you and I, and pretty much all non-sacrals, but I feel like it's amplified with our unique chart components. The amplification is real and we do feel very good, but the crash is epic because there isn't that regeneration, and it's a very difficult dance. I joke that my chart is like a cosmic joke because I'm so driven and I really want it all, and it's genuine. It's not even, sometimes it's coming from ego, and that's for me to constantly check in with, but I passionately and deeply, I have a vision and I want to see it come to fruition, and then my energy will just dip out. And so finding that balance is almost laughable. I love that you have scales behind you of the balance of things, because
Right.
so much for the non-sacral is that balance. But when I realized what it was to be a non-sacral and to go to events, specifically in person, I was doing a lot of events at the time that I crashed. I would like plug in, just like literally plug into a sacral motor, and then unplugging, I would come home and just collapse. And I thought that there was something wrong with my house. I thought I needed to clear the energy there. I thought, I had all of these theories about why I would just crash when I came home, but understanding being a non-sacral and coming home and closing the door and going in my room, and then not being able to move for days, it's like taking an IV drip of straight caffeine for a non-sacral when we're around the generators. And then when it's over, the drain on the adrenals is so significant, even though the root is really assigned to the adrenals, and both you and I have that defined root, but we can't ride the root motor in lieu of the sacral motor, even though we try. And so it was like giving up an addiction to an actual physical substance, to realize I can't do that anymore. It's not an actual sustainable way to get through life. And so, because I didn't realize how much that I was doing it and how much it was costing me. And I had to have my health completely go away and have the answer to it withheld for years, so that I did the other work besides, taking the exact prescriptions that I was given. I had to do the other work, the mindset work and the belief work of actually not wanting to behave in a way anymore, to that degree. But it's still very hard. My sweet husband does not understand my lack of sacral energy, of course, but he believes me when I tell him. And so he's constantly kind of like, hey, do you think you should slow down? Do you think? And I'm just like, don't tell me what to do. Because when I'm in my zone, I want to just go and go and go. But I'm better and better at trying to listen to that very subtle voice that says, hey, you should probably rest now for just a
And
bit.
then your aura will do the work for you, right?
Yes, if I can actually listen, but I feel
Right.
like I'm constantly interfacing with it, where I would imagine like a splenic projector or a mental projector maybe could fit a little bit more into this, because they don't have those other motors to kind of grab to. Because you can rope the will and the emotional and the heart and the root all together and try to ride it like a
I don't
sacral
know.
motor, and it just doesn't.
Yeah, I do think that it can work, that this can, it sometimes people with a lot of openness can actually find it more of a problem because they can amplify all those
Yes.
other motors,
Oh,
Whereas
for
we
sure.
still have to have the sync of the root pulse and the emotional wave. The will you can just force until you're dead, right? Until you're dead tired. And that's the one that's the biggest, like, I have fried
Yes.
out my will center, big time in
Yes.
the past. And
Yeah.
so, I was telling you earlier, one of my favorite sayings is just because I can doesn't mean I should.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, and that amplification is so real, but I feel like when people go through their deconditioning, when they go through their healing and they come to who they truly are, that they can kind of move a little bit more into the stillness at
yeah.
times and allow the amplification where you and I have these motors that are buzzing. They're not nearly as powerful as the sacral motor, but there still is a discharge that needs to happen. There still is that
And that
physical outlet.
that conscious sun gate, hanging gate on an undefined sacral, whether you're a
Oh,
projector
yeah.
or a manifester,
Yeah.
is super, super powerful because we're here to connect and through that connection, amplify this energy in a way that is really extreme. I mean,
Yes.
it's just finding it. And, I can see um, where that is definitely something that we share. I do wonder how that it's very different for you because I have the 1/8 that defines my identity center and my throat, and you
Oh,
have
yeah.
those two centers open. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering how your lack of consistent, I don't like to use the word lack, but the inconsistent energy of the undefined sacral combined with the actually, you have the same configuration on your G center as my manifestor daughter. She's got the 7 and the
And the
13
13.
hanging
Mhm.
on her open identity center. And then she has just the 9 on her undefined sacral.
Mm.
So, and I think that there's a lot of trying to find your identity without
100%.
that consistent energy to do the things that everybody says you should do, right? And she also
Oh,
defined
100%.
will.
Yeah. And to be so very conditioned by the family of origin, like this is what you do. You go to church and you go to school and you go serve a mission and then you come home and then you go get your degree and then you marry well and da 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 da. And that path was laid out and that has been very I've had a lot of layers of healing from that wounding that my undefined identity center took in and used as the compass that was never for me.
Yeah. Yeah, so I could definitely see where all of that could play in. So right now you're doing the certification with you certify people in, is it two separate things or
Yes.
a combo thing or
Oh no, they're very robust. These are not just like lovely, let's learn from a place of light and truth. They're very robust. They're industry leading content. I have never seen a certification as robust as this light-filled human design. I'm very particular. I have a stellium in the 10th house. Saturn is conjunct Jupiter in the 10th house for me. And so I have extremely high standards. I really feel passionate. If you're going to call something a certification program, it needs to outfit people to actually be able to do what you say it's going to do. And so that comes through really strong. And I also felt very strongly with human design that it needs to be taught by more than one aura type. Because as much as I can study and as much as projectors are here to be the guides, I cannot fully explain to a sacral being what it's like to have a defined sacral. And so we have a whole team of different aura types that are teaching and compiling and working cohesively, and then also delivering the information piece by piece throughout the whole 16-week program that's also accompanied by 16 weeks of live Q&A guidance. So I wanted this to exist when I got into human design, and it didn't. And as is kind of the hallmark of my life, if something doesn't exist that needs to exist in the world, I seem to be the one invited to do it. And I cannot even count how many invitations I had to do this certification after doing my astrology certification that's been running for years. And so it's very exciting because I find that most human design programs just leave you wanting more.
Hmm. Yeah. What did you find that they left you wanting? Like, that makes me want you to elaborate.
I found that the different programs that I would look into or that I actually enrolled in, um, I didn't have the tools that I needed to read a chart to the degree that I knew it deserved to be read. And I still didn't fully understand different things about the aura mechanics that just felt like they were lacking, that either I found bits and pieces over here and bits and pieces over here. I hadn't found it in one cohesive place. And I find most people that are studying human design are sampling a little bit here and a little bit there. And that's beautiful, because then you get to learn from a variety of teachers, which is what I feel so passionately about anyway.
Especially as triple splits, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
The sampling and like the reflector that we have, Brooke Prothero, like I love talking with her about the sampling energy, because of course that's very much her approach, and her brilliance is just absolutely unmatched. And so as we are developing this and seeing it come to fruition, we've got our first cohort that's running now, and we're creating the modules as we go week by week, and then it will be done and created for forevermore. The sampling, you can still go out and learn from all the different places, but it is so complete. It is so thorough. It's we left nearly nothing out, because you can't. It's so magnificent to teach from the baby base level all the way up to, like, you have all the tools you need, and then you can go back and review this as many times as you need to.
So you have Light-Filled Human Design courses, and then you also have Light-Filled Astrology certification courses, right? They're two separate things?
Yes, I have smaller courses in both of those that are just more approachable for somebody that just wants to learn. And then I have full certification programs in both, yes.
Okay. Then there's not one that really marries them together, like...
It would be extremely difficult to do that, to learn both systems. It would be like a year-long program to be able to do both, because they're completely separate systems.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of people who take both courses?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of, and it's very exciting, because I think you can be magnificent only knowing astrology, or be magnificent only knowing human design. You can even be magnificent not knowing any of this stuff, and still be able to have a very fulfilling life and bless yourself and other people. But those that feel drawn to really master both, I feel like it's a superpower. Like, just being able to quickly pull somebody's charts and just immediately glancing at them and knowing so many things about the person that you're interacting with is, I delight in it.
Well, it's clear that it lights you up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if people want to work with you or find out more about this, what's the best place for them to look for that?
Best place is lightfilled.co. That's everything. Okay. So it's filled with light. That's what God told me that this was. That's what it is. It's a movement more than anything. It's for those that are called to deeply learn about themselves and spirituality and their own spiritual gifts and how to synthesize all of this, because the point isn't human design and the point isn't astrology. Those are amazing tools to help you know yourself, because as one of my clients said, we are the mysteries of God. We are the whole point of all of it. And these are amazing tools to know yourself.
Yeah. I don't totally agree with that. And I believe that, that's why I always say that knowing human design isn't the point. The point is using human design to know yourself, right?
Yes, absolutely.
For me, it's all about radical self-trust, so that we can shine our light and be the light in the world as we're called to be. So I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's been really fun talking to you, and we could geek out more on our charts, I'm sure. And I would like to thank everyone for bearing with us, like talking about all the numbers and stuff. But your story was very inspiring, and so I'd like to just...
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, and I'm confident that who needs to hear this will.
Okay, awesome. Peace out, everybody. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Real Human Design Stories. I hope these stories help you see how human design can reframe not only your own story, but also the stories you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to tell a more empowered story about who you came here to be, I invite you to explore ways to work with me directly at kathybashanko.com. Supporting this podcast is easy. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star rating, like, comment, and share with your friends. This helps the podcast grow the most. You can also become a contributing sponsor for as little as 99 cents a month. Details are available at realhumandesignstories.com. Thanks again for being here. Real Human Design Stories is created and hosted by me, Kathy Bashanko, and produced by Number 3 Productions. Peace out, everybody.